Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, Tony Gonsolin struggled again as the Dodgers dropped the series to the Blue Jays. Rough game for the Dodgers offense and rough game for Gonsolin. We'll talk all about that. Another trade went down. The Dodgers acquired another middle infielder who can only hit left-handed pitching, just like they did the day before. Talk about that and who they got rid of in that trade. And then we'll talk about one big name that has been rumored to be on his way to the Dodgers. That's what's on tap. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching and listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we're bringing the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And Vince, it was a rough game for the Dodgers. They dropped the series finale to the Blue Jays 8-1 to lose the series 2-1. The D-backs also lost. The Giants won, so now the Giants are in second place alone, pick up a game on the Dodgers. But overall, you know, the game in a lot of ways was secondary, but the big takeaway from the game for me, I think for you too, was that Tony Gonsolin struggled again. I know at 30 pitches into the game, he was at 15 balls and 15 strikes. His ratio got a little better from there, but never got to where you wanted it. He ended up throwing a career high 109 pitches, and unfortunately, the 103rd pitch was hit over the wall by Whit Merrifield, and that made it 5-0. It was a 3-run homer, made it 5-0, kind of put the game away. Up to that point, I mean, Gonsolin was one pitch away from having a reasonably okay outing. He wasn't efficient enough, but if he had Merrifield 0-2, and if he gets him out, he's through 5 innings, 2 runs allowed, and who knows what happens to the game. But that pitch kind of changed the entire perception of that game.
Yeah, and even then, the performance would have been adequate numbers-wise, but not necessarily adequate in terms of how he pitched. I mean, he gave up 7 hits, 3 walks. He did have 5 strikeouts, but again, like, he's just not, last year years past, he's been good at run prevention, maybe a little bit lucky. He's outperformed his peripherals, but he has at least looked like he has the stuff, and, he was frustrating at times, but then you knew that he had stuff to get it back. Now he's frustrating, and you don't know if he has the stuff to get it back. Like, he had a couple splitters today that looked really good. But other than that, he just, similar to almost everybody in this Dodger rotation right now, there's just no confidence inspired when he's on the mound. If he does happen to get through 5-6 innings with less than 4 or 5 runs, you consider it like lucky at this point, or, grateful, because, you go back and, his entire season's not great. He has a 4.25 ERA on the year. You go back his last 7 starts, he's got a 7.25 ERA with the 1.39 WHIP, 15 walks in 36 innings, and 35 hits on top of that. Like, he's just hasn't been good. And Dave Roberts talked about it after the game. He says, quote, as far as right now where he's at, there's just that next gear that he can tap into. I don't know if it's a mindset thing. I don't know if it's a fatigue thing. I don't know if it's an execution thing. It's something that we're obviously mindful of. I think it's closer than, say, the last 3 or 4 outings have been. Yeah, I don't know what it is. He doesn't look good. And, you can only blame the ankle injury that started his year off weird so much. And I don't think anyone is anyways. But, yeah, it's similar to kind of what you were saying about Syndergaard. Like, he just can't tap into that next thing. And that's where he's at now. And, he just doesn't have it right now.
Yeah, the weird thing was he hit 95 with his fastball today, which, one of the concerns with him this year has been his fastball velocity has been down over where it's been in previous years. Today, he actually threw it pretty hard, but didn't have the command, couldn't get strike one. That's one of the big things Roberts mentioned was getting strike one, getting ahead of hitters, and that just didn't happen. And if my nephew's getting ready for bed in the background, if you can hear him, that's that cute giggle you can probably hear on the podcast. That's not me. But I was thinking, like, if the Dodgers didn't make any trades right now for starting pitching at the trade deadline, going into a postseason series, it's like Clayton Kershaw is your game one starter, and then Bobby Miller game two at this point.
Yeah, I mean, at this point right now, I would trust Bobby Miller more than anybody else.
He's at least got the good stuff, like at some point, if you got two guys whose stuff isn't overpowering, like Julio and Gonsolin, and they're also not getting the job done in other ways, then maybe you just bet on the stuff in a postseason series. Really does underscore, though, how much they do need to get another starting pitcher.
Yeah, and honestly, at this point, just the way things have gone here the last few weeks, I just, Michael Grove to at least get you 2 times through a lineup, 3-4 innings with limited damage at this point. And, I guess that's one of the things that they could look at kind of once things clear out after the deadline. Let's just say they don't get enough pitching or they don't get pitching at all. When it comes, they can probably get by in the rest of the regular season the way this is going right now. And, it's not going to be ideal. It's not going to be fun a lot of the times, but they can get by. And then in the postseason, they might have to go to like piggyback starts and just try to, the thing is, like with Grove or like with Gonsolin, he hasn't really been good anytime through a lineup, but that would be time to figure it out, I guess. Sheehan, same thing. He's kind of struggled lately. It hasn't really been a first or second time through a lineup thing. It's just a not throwing strikes thing. And then Julio, you wouldn't want to put Julio in a situation where he has an opener, but again, that first inning always struggles is for him. So they'd have to get creative, I think, if they don't get creative here at the deadline with arms that they find.
Yeah, and I've always wondered, like with Julio, if he does pitch at some point, the first inning he pitches will be the first inning he pitches. So is it the 1, 2, 3 hitters, the top hitters in the lineup that he struggles with, or is it just his first inning? Because if so, then an opener wouldn't help any, because if you're going to struggle every first inning you pitch, the first inning is pretty darn important. So it's a weird situation right now. And obviously the Dodgers are going to be heavily in on the starting pitching market. We're going to talk in the next segment about one of those starting pitchers being off the market now. And interestingly, the Dodgers traded away a starting pitcher. Why would the Dodgers trade away a starting pitcher? Isn't that what they need? Well, not the one they traded. So lots to talk about with the trade that did go down and potential trades that might go down in the future. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Look, if you're out picking up burgers and hot dogs for some barbecue, you're going to the store. Why not get cash back for it with Ibotta? Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload the receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. Or you could use your cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, I always get that wrong, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code MLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code MLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code MLB. All right, we are back. We want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. If you're watching this on YouTube, love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments section. If you're listening on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you through social media or email. We also want to remind you that you can catch every Dodgers home game, the every Dodgers game, the home radio broadcast, the Dodgers broadcast on Sirius XM or the SXM app, simply by launching the app and searching for Dodgers. You can also listen to this podcast on the SXM app by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And Vince, the Dodgers made another trade the day after getting Kike Hernandez for 2 minor league pitchers. They got Amed Rosario, who has a similar profile to Kike in that he's not a very good overall hitter, but hits lefties better than righties and can play a couple different positions. Probably not as well as Kike, although Kike's defense this year has been pretty bad. And so the Dodgers, Rosario's been mostly a shortstop, but they introduced him as a shortstop / outfielder. And the guy they sent to the Guardians in return was Noah Syndergaard, which I think in some ways that's the big news about this trade.
Yeah, you were probably going to DFA Noah Syndergaard. I don't think anyone would have tried to pick him up because of the salary. So you probably would have ended up, letting him go or outrighting him if he accepted that. So to get something for him is beneficial. Now, again, like we talked about after the Kike trade, this doesn't preclude them from doing anything else they really need to. The salary was a wash. They're paying whatever it is to make the salaries equal. That's what the Dodgers ended up paying, for Syndergaard. But Amed Rosario is a slight upgrade in the sense of now, Yanni Hernandez is not going to be on the roster. So, obviously we talked about Yanni the other day, but DeLuca got hurt, so Yanni's still on. So now Yanni won't be on. And with Rosario, if you ask a Guardians fan about Amed Rosario, they hate him. And I think similar sentiments from like Red Sox fans about Kike, like they just were so over him at this point. I did ask one Guardians fan I know about Amed Rosario. He said he sucks. Where's defense shortstop in baseball? Never walks, grounds into a lot of double plays. Then there was the tweet about the Dodgers have traded for. There's 2 qualified players in MLB this year with an OPS below 680 and -6 outs above average or worse. The Dodgers got both of them in back-to-back days. But again, we choose to look at the positive sides on here. And the positives with Rosario is that he can't hit lefties, and he's been hitting since June started. Since June 1st, in 45 games, he's hitting .301 with a 750 OPS. And on the season, he has over 800 OPS, I believe, against lefties. And yeah, now the defense, not great, but if he's hitting, the Dodgers can get by with not great defense every so often. And like I said, the fact that they listed him as infield, outfield, he has played some outfield in the past. It's just another guy that can play a few different places and makes them better against left-handed pitching, which is what they mainly need improvement on in terms of the offense.
Yeah, and I think both guys, the key point to remember is Kike with the Red Sox and Rosario with the Guardians. Both of those guys were everyday players there, and they're not going to be with the Dodgers. And so trying to make a platoon player an everyday player, you're going to be upset, especially when he's right-handed. And so the side that he's worse against is, 75% of the pitches that you face. It's going to be bad. And so both of these guys being in platoon roles now should help them, put them in better position to succeed. We've seen that with Jason Hayward this year. He almost only faces right-handed pitching. And I think that's part of the reason he's had a very successful season. And so, with stuff like that, interesting thing that David Vassay was talking about, I was listening. I was at the game. If you're watching on YouTube, you can probably see how red my face is. That's because I was sitting in the sun at Wednesday's day game and put sunscreen on my arms, but not on my face. And this is what happens. But after the game, as I do often, I was listening to the Dodgers post-game clubhouse show and then Dodger Talk with Vassay. And he said that he feels like this trade for Rosario combined with the trade for Kike is setting things up for the Dodgers to be able to trade Chris Taylor, whether it is a trade for a pitcher or a trade for Nolan Arenado. And we're going to talk more about the Arenado idea, I think, in the third segment here. Vassay had a lot to say about that, but just the overall idea of with Kike and Rosario, both of whom can theoretically play the middle infield and outfield and hit left-handed pitching, they're both basically the same profile as Chris Taylor. Now, neither of them has hit as well as Chris Taylor overall this year, but I think probably both of them have hit similarly against left-handed pitching. And so it does make Taylor more expendable, possibly, if that is what they're looking to do. It I don't know. Do you find any merit in that idea of the Dodgers maybe trading Chris Taylor?
I mean, by definition of how he, laid it out, yeah, it makes sense. And then, for me, it just means if you're making your roster, expendable in a certain sense where you're open to different things that you maybe weren't open to before, getting creative, kind of how we talked about earlier. Because there are a lot of teams right now that are still deciding whether they want to be buyers or sellers. And some teams might want to kind of straddle and do both. Like, they want to buy a little bit, they want to sell a little bit. So if there's a team with, I would imagine pitching wise, like if there's a team that has decent starting pitching depth and they want to get rid of it, but they want somebody that can help them offensively, then Chris Taylor can fit that profile, and maybe it makes sense in that way. And I think depending how much the pitcher made coming back, like the luxury tax does play a small part in it. I think they can get under the third threshold and save themselves 10 spots on a draft pick if they do that. But again, that wouldn't really factor into it. That would just be a benefit of something they end up doing. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it makes sense to have as many options as possible when it comes to trading at this deadline and seeing what you can do. And, if it happened to come down to Chris Taylor, specifically, I think it means that there's a more than significant upgrade coming, whether it's offensively or pitching wise, because again, you don't trade somebody that's major league quality and a guy that you've had around for a while and has performed not ideal how you want him to perform, but good enough, and has had moments in the past, especially in clutch situations. So yeah, I think it just opens up possibilities for you to explore different things.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Syndergaard, the other part of that trade going away from the Dodgers. It's it's not a loss at all for the Dodgers. Like you said, he was never going to throw another pitch for the Dodgers anyway. His minor league rehab starts have been uninspiring. And so his time with the Dodgers was done. It's surprising that they found anybody to take him on in trade. But, it also tells you about how Cleveland feels about Amed Rosario. That's the level that we're at here. It's a bummer. I remember how excited we are, or at least guardedly optimistic we all were about when the Dodgers signed Syndergaard. He was saying during spring that his goal was to throw 100 again, and he thought the Dodgers had what it took to help him get there. And it was just not quite from day one, but almost entirely just
first
a
start was cool.
disaster. Yeah. Yeah. But other than that, pretty much a disaster on every level. And it really set the tone for this season. Going into the season, it's like we were talking about offensively, the Dodgers lost Trey and Justin Turner, but they added in JD Martinez and different people. And so offensively, they should be close to what they were last year. And that's borne out to be pretty true. And we said pitching, they lost Tyler Anderson and Andrew Heaney, but they're basically being replaced by Dustin May and Noah Syndergaard. And that, that could work out. Those guys could be as good as Anderson and Heaney were last year. Well, May got hurt and Syndergaard was Syndergaard. And so that's really it's remarkable Dodgers are in first place because their pitching has been so bad. And Syndergaard, he's not the reason why it's been bad. He's just a very good illustration of how bad the pitching has been.
Yeah. Before we move on and talk about Nolan Arenado, one more stat that can get you excited about Amed Rosario is that with runners in scoring position, he's hitting 348 on the year with 129 WRC plus. So he's not good with bases empty. He does hit into a lot of double plays with men on base in general, but once those guys are in scoring position, he's hitting very well. So
well, that's something anyway. We'll see. All right, we are going to come back in a minute and talk about Nolan Arenado, the rumors that he could be headed to the Dodgers, where that came from, what I heard from David Vassay and what he heard from others. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. All right, we are back. We want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Want to remind you that you can catch the Dodgers radio broadcast of every game on Sirius XM or the SXM app. Just launch the app and search for Dodgers. You can also listen to this podcast on the SXM app by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Want to thank you everydayers for being with us every day. If you're not an everydayer, join the club. All you got to do is watch or listen every day. It's super cool. And we love talking Dodgers with you. It's been a lot of fun. I've been to 2 games this week. Probably won't go to any more because no game today. Then they start series with the Reds on Friday, and then I drive home on Saturday. And I've heard that this weekend series has gotten pretty expensive because people are excited about the Reds. Between a weekend series at Dodger Stadium and the Reds being an exciting team, this weekend seems to be pretty pricey. And so I'll probably just enjoy these 2 that I had, but I did run into a few of you everydayers at Dodger Stadium, and that's always fun. So listening to Vasse on the way home from the game, and he was talking about Nolan Arenado, and he said that we've heard before, we've heard other reports that the Cardinals aren't going to look to trade Arenado unless he asks them to, tells them he wants to be traded. But what Vasse said was that he has heard from 5 different sources that he would only approve a trade to the Dodgers. Arenado has a full no trade clause. He can veto any trade. And he said he will only approve a trade to the Dodgers. And which makes sense in a lot of ways. He's from Southern California. Obviously, if you want to play in Southern California and you want to play on a winning team, there's really only one option. And so Arenado, we actually have a listener. I'm trying to remember who it was, but one of our listeners works as a waiter in Orange County and actually served Nolan Arenado's parents a year or 2 ago. And he told me that Arenado's parents told him that their son will play for the Dodgers. So maybe that can be the 6th source on this besides David Vasse's 5 anonymous sources. But Arenado, I was thinking about this. We were talking yesterday, Vince, about the 2021 trade with the Nationals and how it was kind of a win-win for them to include Trey Turner in the trade because it gave the Dodgers, 2 pieces, including one that wasn't just a 2-month rental. And it gave the Dodgers an excuse to trade some top prospects to the Nationals. I wonder if we could see the same kind of thing here with the Cardinals, because the Cardinals do have a couple pitching options, whether it's Jack Flaherty or Jordan Montgomery, some starting pitching options. And then with Nolan Arenado, the Dodgers kind of have the leverage. If it's true that Arenado would only approve a trade to the Dodgers, that takes some of the negotiating power away from the Cardinals. But by including a starting pitcher, that might be a way to get that win-win situation and get some of that trade synergy going to find a deal that works for both sides.
Yeah, that would be the way in. I get, it depends on the Cardinals, because like if he asked to get traded, then they wouldn't have leverage much anyways, because he'd be able to force their hand in terms, like you said, of what he would accept. I see a lot of people talking about Arenado, and the first thing they talk about is just like salary wise, and if it would preclude them from getting Ohtani in the offseason or whatever the case. And again, this is always with the caveat that the Dodgers can afford whatever they want to afford, and they'll be able to handle it. But his deal isn't like terrible. He gets $35 million in 2024, but 5 of that paid by the Rockies. And then it goes down to $32 million in 2025 with 5 paid by the Rockies, 27 with $5 million paid by the Rockies, and then the last year $15 million. So like it's a contract wise going, the lowering salary is beneficial. But yeah, I think the if the way they're going to make a splash, that would be the way to make the splash. There's not really too many options to make that splash anymore, especially considering the Angels reportedly took Shohei off the market, and the reportedly became more of a certainty when they traded for Lucas Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez from the White Sox. So like the package of Tim Anderson and Giolito still, or it can't happen now. The Tim Anderson could still get traded, but it might have to come with somebody else or by himself, which I don't think the Dodgers would do by himself anyways. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here, but I do think that maybe Arenado's already made that call, and maybe the Dodgers and Cardinals are already talking, and maybe they want to bring home Jack Flaherty too, and maybe that's the big move they make, and the Cardinals are still in like win-ish mode, not win this year, but they still believe they could win possibly. So maybe they'd ask the Dodgers for more guys closer to the major leagues, and if that's the case, Michael Busch, something like that. If it's offensively, and then there's a bunch of pitchers the Dodgers could send that way if they want to. So it all matches up. And it's just a matter of will it happen.
Yeah, and the money thing, as far as Arenado's renting contract, that's one of the reasons that Vassay mentioned as possibly including Chris Taylor in that trade, because Taylor does have $13 million a year coming to him over the next 2 years with a $12 million option, $5 million buyout. So he's owed $30 million over the next 2 years, basically. And so including him in that trade could offset some of that money, which would give them flexibility for an Ohtani type or whatever in the offseason. Just thinking about Arenado, obviously he becomes the everyday third baseman for the Dodgers if they were to make that trade, which pushes Max Muncy back to second base. And suddenly, like, Miguel Rojas is now your only offensive liability in the lineup most of the time, except on days when Austin Barnes is playing. And you could even, Rojas then can become the guy who gets bumped out of the lineup when Mookie's playing the infield. And, if Muncy's at second, then Mookie can play shortstop. And so Rojas becomes a part-time player to go along. So your bench is basically at that point, Rojas, Kike, Rosario, and Barnes. Or, on days when it's a left-handed pitcher, Peralta and Hayward are there, and two of those guys are starting. Changes things a lot, and it really kind of lengthens out. You don't have those black holes as much on the roster offensively. The kind of the interesting thing is Arenado's defense has actually been worse than usual, a lot worse than usual this year. But that could be, a weird thing. I think Arenado makes any team better, and I am all aboard the Nolan Arenado to the Dodgers train.
Yeah, I would imagine even with his bad offense or bad defense, it's still better than what Muncy. I don't know, but eye test wise, it would probably look that way. And yeah, Arenado, after a slow start, he's really picked it up. He's up to a 130 OPS plus on the year, 22 home runs, 77 RBIs, 856 OPS. Like, he is still a legitimate offensive threat. And you start to wonder that sits in the middle of the Dodger lineup, how that might look. And you can start to let yourself smile a little bit. Again, it's only 5 days now to the deadline, but that's so long, and who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 days.
Yeah, but they've made two trades. Like you mentioned, Giolito going to the Angels kind of breaks the seal on the starting pitching market, and so the Dodgers have an off day today. Yeah, ideally they wouldn't get Arenado today because I think the Cardinals are still playing the D-backs one more game. So let Arenado help the Cardinals beat the D-backs really quick and then send him to the Dodgers. He can be there in the lineup by Friday. Just make it happen, Andrew Friedman. And obviously a starting pitcher or maybe two, then we're good to go. So one more episode this week. There's no game tomorrow, so we'll be doing a mailbag episode tomorrow. So start getting your questions in now. We'll put out a call on social media, but you don't got to wait for that. You got anything else for today, Vince?
Just when it comes to the trade for starting pitching, the Angels gave up their number 2 and 3 prospects. That doesn't mean it would cost Dodgers number 2 and 3 prospects. The Angels number 2 prospect is number 65. Dodgers have 5 guys ahead of them. The comparables would be Andy Pages, who's like 15 spots ahead of him, and then Emmett Sheehan, who's like 6 spots behind him. So that's still a lot for a rental, but not as much as Dalton Rushing or someone like that.
Yeah, not all prospect systems are created equal.
Yeah.
All right, that'll do it for us. Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Remember, you can catch every Dodger game on the home radio broadcast on SiriusXM or the SXM app. Just launch the app and search for Dodgers. You can also catch this podcast on the SXM app by searching for Locked On Dodgers. I want to thank our everydayers for being here with us every day. We love you. Please join that club if you haven't yet already. All you got to do is watch or listen every day. You can find this on this podcast wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. You can also follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. Is that what they call it these days? at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com, and our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.